This DJNTV show is sponsored by DJ Event Planner, Electra Voice, DJ Trivia and DJ Bingo, ProX Direct, Odyssey Cases, Perfect Portals, Instant DJ Requests, and our DJNTV Insiders. This is John Young from DJNTV. Thanks for watching.
Well, good evening. Welcome to a wonderful, wonderful Monday night.
Well, it can't be too wonderful because Cubbie's not with us.
Well,
because if you say wonderful, wonderful, and Cubbie's not with us, that makes it really sound kind of weird.
Well, I didn't want to tell him.
Oh, okay.
But if you insist on, on that being the case, then
it is a sad Monday night. It's wonderful that you're here with us, but it's a sad moment because Cubbie's not with us right now. But
the good news is he's coming.
On the positive side.
Yes, yes.
This
is what happens when you plan meetings before shows.
Well, he's such a busy man. I mean, this is a guy who's like doing weddings and officiating and performing DJ wise, and then he's got the trivia things he does and all. Oh my goodness, that he can make time to be with us on a regular basis is actually kind of impressive.
It is.
Yeah, it is. It's like that his schedule is crazy compared to mine. It's like I've got my mid-morning nap, I've got my afternoon nap, and then the after supper nap.
It sounds like the dogs in Cubbie's life, though.
They are, and you can see them in the background quite often.
There's some champion sleepers, that's for sure. So
fun.
By the way, real quick here, I want to give a quick shout out to Bob Powell. For those of you that don't know, John's got his shirt behind. I've got the shirt on here. Bob had surgery last week and to open up his airwaves a little bit more. For those of you that don't know, he had COVID, and this is a person who, just thinking about what he went through almost brings me to tears. But he pushed through, and then just last week he had some surgery to undo some of the effects that he ended up having. And all things that I've heard and seen from things on Facebook have been that the surgery was a success and already on that healing road, better than ever expected. You checking the dates?
Yeah, I was wondering, how long was he? He was down for a long time.
3 months?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, he had a tough road, very tough road with COVID there, and that was all in 2021. Yeah, 2021. What an ordeal.
Yes.
So
so for those of you that know Bob, and he is one of our regulars, so Bob, we're pulling for you. Thank you so very much that things are pulling through and that you had a great surgery. But I wanted to wear tonight in honor of you. I can't wait to see you in person again, give you big hugs, and be glad that everything's going well. So.
For sure. So tonight, Dan, I wanted to talk a little bit about audio. I think since coming back from the Lighting and Audio Symposium, I've seen the whole Watts thing just consistently comes back, and I wanted to dig into that a little bit tonight and look at a few things. And we've got a lot of numbers we're going to be looking at this evening. So that's kind of the bulk of it. But I wanted to what?
In case you forgot, this is Monday night.
Yeah.
tomorrow night is Ben Stowe.
Yes, yeah. Tomorrow night we're going to talk about DSP, the history of DSP, why DSP is important, and then how do you utilize DSP in this modern world. Do you think that one's going to go a little deep? Yeah, exactly. This is going to look like.
So we're putting the layman's terms on it. We're putting the ones that everybody should be able to understand.
Exactly.
And doesn't have ends with depends on everything. Okay,
yeah,
got it.
Precisely.
Just making sure.
Yeah, tomorrow night will be a much more in-depth discussion than what tonight is. But yeah, for those of you who didn't catch last Monday's show, we actually did that from the hotel. We were at, Michael, Nicholas, and I were at the Lighting and Audio Symposium that was happening down in Burnsville. Burnsville, the location that they have it is at the Electro-Voice headquarters. It's not an Electro-Voice promotional event, meaning that, hey, here's our speakers, buy our speakers. They're very, very intentional on giving you information that is universal. And they do have more than just Electro-Voice discussions and things there, as far as they do have other brands that they can talk about and are be a part of. Oh, Cubbie's ready to jump in with us. So it was a great, we were there for 3 of the 4 days, but what they ended up doing is on the 3rd day, which is it's lighting, audio. They ended up cramming some of the things that I would have missed on the 4th day. They moved them back into the 3rd day just by luck of the draw for us. So I was pretty happy about that. And then we were good to go. Probably the biggest thing, guys. Cubbie, thanks for being with us there. It's good to see you, my friend.
Yes, sir. Sorry I'm late.
Yeah, you got an audio. Good. That's what I was after. So, guys, one of the biggest things that I took away from last week was if you go back and watch Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe shows, we covered 99% of the audio and lighting symposium. It's like, oh yeah, well, I suppose, one of the guys who's one of the main teachers there, and he networks with these the EV techs and things. It only makes sense that if we're going to cover discussions at some point.
So I'm glad you could admit that now that they're officially done. Like all the word is that 10 was it. So if you missed out, the only way you get that information is to go back and check some of the old videos.
And really, when Ben was up there speaking about different parts of the audio world that he was covering, there were numerous times you guys might get frustrated when we're doing a Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe show, and he's like, yeah, we did a show on that. You can just refer back to it. Yeah, he does that in person too. Yeah, John and I did a really good show on that, and it was, it's some of it where we just did a few weeks ago when we were talking about subwoofer math. When we were going into that, and they were talking about speaker placement in the room, and are 212s better than a 15, that kind of a thing, and so there was a lot of discussion going on, and it's like, I know the answer to that one, but I didn't do that. I found myself when the presenters were up there speaking and presenting things, trying to ask the questions. It felt like I was just doing a 3-day long interview with Ben Stowe. It was to ask the questions to interpret it for the average person, because some of the texts were really, really knowledgeable, which was good because of being around Ben, and he kind of eased me into some of that information a little bit. But you could see for some folks in the room, this was like drinking from the fire hose, huge fire hose, and it was impressive. It was fun, but it was kind of neat to know that, hey, a lot of this information, granted, being right there and such is one thing, but if you really, really need the information, much of it is on a past Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe show. So, okay. So the biggest takeaway from the show last week, or the audio side of it. Have you guys ever played with setting the delay on speakers, where you have so they did a demonstration. I'm going to do the video. I'm going to do a version of it out here. Is they took the eVerse 8. Now this could be any speaker that has delay in it. So just as I'm sitting here, my ETX has delay, my Evolve 50s have delay, my Mackies have delay that will allow you to adjust the sound delay. So what you end up having is you got your say I'm on stage here, and then out a little ways I have my first speaker, and it's say a long throw. Maybe I'm outside at a county fair, and the stage is pushing the sound out. Well, I've got my first speaker by the stage, And then I want to put a speaker down maybe about 150 feet out there that's going to cover the next round of people that are behind a little farther. Well, if I have both speakers and I just run my XLR from speaker 1 to speaker 2, and I'm talking, you're going to hear, because the sound coming from the first speaker is traveling at 1,100 feet per second approximately. So it's going to actually, the electric signal is going to get to that second speaker. It's going to make noise, and then here comes the sound from the first speaker. So you end up with this echoing thing going on. So what they were showing is showing if you just go and you can dial it in, which we've talked about it on paper, but I've never actually really done it, and I've never seen it done. And he's on the microphone, test 1 2, and you're hearing test 1 1 2 2, test 1 1 2 2, test, and then all of a sudden test 1 1 2. It just clears a bell once you got it when you got it right in there, and it's like, okay, that is really, really cool. That capability of being able to go, in my head as a wedding DJ, if I'm in a tent, a long tent or something to that effect, I could literally go and have my DJ booth at this side, because I've played in tents that have been 100 feet long, and I could have speakers about halfway down, but aiming those speakers down instead of in, I could aim them down to kind of fill the far end. And then I would put a 50 or 60 foot delay, depending upon what that distance was. And then it would sound, there would be no echo. I've done versions of that without resetting it, and there's been an echo, and I just wrote it off as it was just, the tent or outdoor or whatever. But in reality, it was that sound, that distance. I didn't think 60 feet was enough to cause it, but yes, it is. So having, turning the speakers so they're firing away from the DJ booth and then time delaying them to that 60 feet would make the other end of the room sound so much better. So that was probably...
I usually think of one of the applications for this would be, if you're outdoor ceremonies, right? So a lot of us are starting to get to the point where we're shooting stuff from the front and trying to shoot back. And if you've got a larger group, you could help fill that in. And if you're using, your eVerser or however and running them together, you could like really make a kick butt ceremony sound like pristine outdoors, which is very hard to do.
But the biggest thing to keep, they have to be facing the same direction. Mm-hmm. Because if we've got, from my DJ booth and they're facing out, and then if I have them facing in, now there's going to be some of that bleed that comes back. So the people who are sitting at 45 feet are going to hear the front speakers, and they're going to hear that delayed. And now they're going to have that echo. But if we delay it so that all speakers are facing out, this audio will finally, it'll hit at the speaker. And so everyone who's sitting right next to the speaker is going to hear both of them in conjunction. They're going to hear the audio from the front as well as that remote speaker. So the direction of the speakers makes a huge difference. But yeah, in a ceremony, that could easily be, because you could have the speakers, there have been times where they've told me to, put the speakers behind the officiants and off to the side. So I could have the main speakers there firing down, halfway down, have a second set of speakers, time delayed. It would sound perfect, and it would carry it all the way down through the space. So yeah, really looking forward to putting that out here, because they did it at, I think, about 100 feet. I want to do it at 50 feet, and then I'm going to go and get every XLR cable I have and take it way down the driveway. What's he doing with the wire again there? So we're going to get into that. About a third subwoofer. Actually, let's just start with subwoofers for a second. There's going to be some videos dropping on Tuesday morning, and I've already shot these with speakers and such. When you have a single subwoofer, they were, again, speaker placement is usually you would set that, you'd have your two satellite or your two top speakers, and you'd set the sub in the middle. You can put it against the wall, you can put it in a corner and do some different things to get more bass sound out of it. If you put it again in the corner, we're now back to doing this thing called time delay, where we would, because that audio back here is 10 feet behind the audio of your speakers, and you will over time develop a sound fatigue if you're having a situation. So if you do put it in a corner, you have to, kind of delay and figure it out and adjust the speakers as you go. If you add a second subwoofer, ideally, for most of us, the way we would do that is it would be to stack two of them in the middle with your two speakers on tripods. Now, as the guys said from EVs, that they know that that's not always, they make them with the pole mounts so you can put the speakers, the subs in the speakers. When you spread those speakers apart at any distance over a foot, you lose the coupling capability. So basically, if they're not side by side, you lose your coupling capability, which is okay. But as you start to spread those subwoofers out, you end up with a lot of noise, some cancellation in frequencies. So if you have two speakers that are 10, 12 feet apart, and if you've walked across the dance floor, you probably hear dead spots. I think you guys both have experienced that. You found a spot where the sound waves are hitting. Ben likes to, one of his pictures he shows is where somebody has dropped a couple of puddles or pebbles in a puddle, and you see the little waves, and where the waves hit, it basically just becomes convoluted and there's nothing. That's really what's happening with your subwoofers when they're apart. Is that and then they get in here, and then there's this dead zone. And if depending upon the distance, it can be a hot spot and then dead zones over here. And as you pull it apart, you end up with dead zone fingering going on. It's the weirdest anomaly. But if you go watch the subwoofer show, I think that Ben showed us a thing on it. So if we stack our subs and we add a third sub, does that really help much? Some people have said, well, I just want to add one more sub. Well, when you stack two subs, let's say the subs max is 120 decibels is what it can do. When you stack two subs, you get that coupling going on, and then you basically get a 3 dB gain is what we've been told across the industry. In order to get it to bump up to be another noticeable change, you almost have to double the subs again. That's why you hear most DJs talking about going from 1 sub to 2, and then we go from 2 subs to 4, and we go from 4 subs to 8. Because that's when you see your biggest jumps. So adding 1 sub will give you a slight bump up, but it doesn't give you a huge noticeable difference until you've literally doubled your subs. So it's kind of a crazy thing when it comes to subwoofers, that they're like, oh yeah, I just want to add one more to get more bass. Oh, it doesn't give you much. So
I think one thing to add kind of to his question, and this is probably a slightly different direction, but assuming that you're set on the 3 to get what you think is going to be that half of a 3 dB gain in theory, right? A lot of us will end up talking about running things in mono, and so if you're doing that, you're basically coming out of your board mixer, whatever that you've got, and going into the subs and just kind of in one, out to one, into the other, out to the other, and then going from there out to your tops. Or if you do it that way and you're coupling and you're keeping your wires or hooking them up in that way, you can just run left side right to one tripod and the right side, say, to your sub, and then up to your top. So that's kind of the way like you're gonna get the least amount of running, assuming you don't have like a DBX system or something that's going to split things off for you. If you're just coming straight from a mixer that doesn't have separate outs, that's what I would do.
And that's one of the things they talked about is what's the best way to hook those up? And one of the things that a lot of the more sound tech guys like to do is they like to, Ben's talked about this, using an aux or using a booth out for running the subs and then having the top. And part of that is because then they can, when a person's on the microphone, you can take that booth out and you can pull it down if you need to, if you haven't already done a high pass filter on that microphone channel. But you can take that booth out, pretty much out, or if you're in an aux, you can take the low end out of that completely. So that way you don't have that microphone feedback issue as much. So the placement of the subs, the best is to get the subs as tight as possible. Once you're over, you've separated those things by, inches, it starts, your benefit of them goes down. And the person mentioned that the dead spots they see in the middle, if you have two subs that are 10, 12, 15, 20 feet apart, that dead spot, there's going to be a dead spot in the middle. If you're 5 feet apart or less, that dead spot won't be in the middle, but it'll be very pronounced just past the middle. So you'll have, if you're like 5 feet or less, you'll have that hot spot in the middle, which will sound really good, but then it'll be just off center.
If they're sitting side by side, butted up against each other, is that going to, because you're where the woofers are is going to be in theory distance as opposed to the stacking. stacking the better option?
It really, for most subs, there's maybe a slight difference in the height versus the width, but most of them are pretty much square, so it doesn't matter too terribly much. It was when we would get into some subs that had scoops and things on them that would make a difference, because there is more distance if you stack them compared to side by side. That's why most concert subs are side by side, because if they do have a scoop or a baffle on the bottom, they need to account for that, because it is, as you say, Dan, it's the distance from cone to cone, as you're referring to there. That's the important part, and getting those cones as close to each other within reason is the best way to do it.
Well, and that's why I was wondering if he might be having some cancellation out, because if he's running all three side by side, your left one and your right one are going to be farther apart.
Yes,
if they're side by side.
Yeah,
So
and that
might be something
well,
wrong.
if you're running three like that and spaced out, he's going to have instead of having just two alleys of dead, there's going to be just all sorts of other ones. Steve mentioned the middle sub in reverse mode with a slight delay. I think, Steve, you're kind of insinuating there with cardioid mode, which many subwoofers are now offering with that. It can be done, but it's usually got to be done with a combination of doing some reverse things, and there's also some digital processing that has to happen to it. It's not something that most DJs have the gear to do unless the speakers have it built in. And I wouldn't recommend doing it unless you know what you're doing, because it's, when done and done right, it's great. When it's done and done, we're just trying it. And if you try it at home, that's one thing. But it can get to the point where you're just losing a lot of bass everywhere, and you're not doing what you're wanting to do, which the cardioid mode is to direct the bass forward as opposed to backwards. And they did a great demonstration of that too. Okay. Okay, so let's jump into top speakers. So what I wanted to get into tonight is, one of the sessions they had was talking about stat sheets and wattage and SPL and how some of the companies they put that information out. Cubbie, when you're going to go to buy speakers, we've talked about this a little bit, but I just wanted to have you throw it in here. Does the wattage in that SPL, does that matter when you're looking at speakers, or what really, how does that fit into your decision-making process?
Yeah, I want to make sure that it covers enough of my events, or all the events, and is it big enough to cover the larger events, or do I need multiple speakers? And I really refer to Ben. Like, Ben, this is what I'm doing. What do we need? And we are 95% weddings, don't do a lot of production, as like a lot of schools. So we're 95% weddings. So I just kind of refer to Ben, because he's the genius on it. He's the man. So I just like, Ben, this is what I got. This is the application I have. What do you suggest? And he's always been right on the mark. So.
And I think that's a good way to look at things, and not that Ben or whoever your favorite person that you trust in that retail industry.
Sure.
But I think the idea that Ben isn't going to base a decision off stats and numbers per se. He's going to base the decision or the recommendation off what is the gig needed for the rig needed for your gigs in that situation, because that's the important part at the end of the day. Because many of the times we're looking at some of these numbers that are put out there by these companies, and most of them are estimated. There's very few that are not. Across the board, everyone is doing it. Sometimes they fudge numbers by their testing mechanisms. Some, we'll put it like Electro-Voice has this anechoic chamber that is basically, if there's no sound that can bounce, it's basically the sound is produced and it dissipates into the walls because of these foam weird things they've got going on. Some companies don't do that. They will test in a room that has a wall that has a little audio treatment, so there's some additional sound pressure coming off the slapback of the wall. So the numbers and some of the results can be a little vary. Some have gone through and they limit. They take they've taken their limiters off, and they basically are running it wide open until it blows up, and that's their numbers that they're pitching. So it can be. There's a variety of ways that they can rig it. Some companies do try to run it as legitimate as possible, and some companies don't, and that's just the reality of the situation. So what I wanted to do is talk about the times when 100 watts can be greater than 1,000 watts. We needed some epic music right there.
Yeah,
Done.
it was really dramatic. It was
Yeah.
really dramatic.
That would have been, yeah, we should have had something. I mean, I don't even have I could have had like all the lights shut off in a spotlight. Come on, that would have been cool too.
Yeah,
Used to have buttons to like make all those funky sounds that was hooked up.
Yeah.
like a morning radio show guy that had all those things.
I used to have that, actually the stupid thing just wanted to do an update here a few minutes ago, or before the shows tonight. And it's like, I haven't used that thing in months. I'm not doing that. So guys, what I kind of put together is a spreadsheet that has a lot of numbers on it. Did you both have a chance to look at that?
Yes.
And it's confusing as all get out, I'm sure. So
Yes.
we're going to walk through that. Okay, let's just jump to before we get to the sheet. Does the cable affect the audio? Yes and no. Yes, from the standpoint that gauge has a little minor factor. If you are too thin, you're not going to be able to haul or move enough electricity, enough energy. But generally, once you get most speaker cables, or I should say most XLR cables that are audio, are going to handle anything you throw at it. Really, what the biggest problem you might have is shielding, and if there's some poor soldering, that's going to be more of an issue for your audio. If you've got some that have just a couple of strands of wire or the aluminum foil, or if you're using the wrong ones, if you're using DMX wires instead of audio wires, there can be some shielding differentials between the two that would cause some anomalies with your audio. So can it? Yes, it can. Is it going to be a major area of concern? Not so much. Myself, I use the platinum cables from NLFX with most of my shows. I do have some shorter cables that are some that I bought from, they were the company that starts with an H that makes cable. Hosa. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got some Hosa brand cables that were a local audio company in St. Cloud, Minnesota. They had some made with their little thing, and it was lifetime guarantee. So I bought, this is back in 1989, 90. I bought a bunch of cables back then, and I used some of those for some shorter runs, the 6-foot runs, because that's what I bought back then. Otherwise, the platinum stuff from Ben is the way to go. And even the Tech Ed EVs, like we've used a lot of cables, and Ben and the crew, they make some of the best cables, XLR cables out there. So, but there's others out there that are good cables that can be very good cables too. Hosa is one of the companies that I also have. Okay. So let's jump into that, Dan. If you could share that document, let's see if we can get that. Ooh, hey, it fits too.
Wow!
Yeah, look at that. I was wondering if it was going to be.
Let's see.
So for those of you, we're going to leave it as a full screen like that, just so you can kind of see it a little bit. And yeah, everything lays out really well. What I did is I went through many of the popular speakers out there. The first two at the top left, or first three, excuse me, example 1, 2, and 3. I just wanted to give you an idea of some speakers, and we'll talk about that. And then below that, I went through EV, QSC, JBL. There was some RCF, Yorkville, Mackey's, Yamaha, and then went Turbo Sound, and then Rockville's Titan, which is a very popular speaker. Those are some Amazon speakers, and then we get into some of the column array down at the very bottom there that we'll dig into. So looking at the top three lines, you've got a 98, 96, and 105 there in that first column. What that represents is basically the test, or the number that they would be able to test those speakers at by pushing it with 1 watt of power, 1 watt of amplifier power, and they are going to take that measurement with a dB meter at 1 meter away. So they're going to put 1 watt of electricity into the speaker and measuring 1 meter from the cones to their little gauge. And I didn't even bring one. It's on the other side. I should have brought one over. But you guys have seen it. They're decibel meters. You can find them on Amazon. Ben sells some too. But he's like, the Amazon ones are just, they function well. Or cell phones can do it too. So that's what they call the sensitivity SPL. Now, as we continue on to the right, you'll see the next column is 2 watts, 4 watts, 8 watts, and continuing on. Basically, every column, it doubles the power. When it comes to audio, in order to make a jump from 1 decibel reading, like a 98, if we double the power, so we go from 1 watt to 2 watts, we're adding 3 dB of gain. Now at the audio symposium, they basically played, here's a sound. Now here is the sound 1 dB higher. And they're like, could you tell a difference? And a couple of guys were like, yeah, I think I can. They're like, yeah, no, very few people can actually tell the difference between two sounds with one being 1 decibel louder. When it gets to be 3 decibel louder, you can detect that there's a change, that it is a little louder. But at 1 decibel, it's really difficult to tell the difference. Now, the reason we go over to 8 watts of power there, and that one you'll see is yellow. Once you have gone 10 decibels higher, that is the perceived point of doubling the sound. So in our example 1, the speaker is putting out 98 decibels. Roughly 108 would be 10 decibels higher, and that would be doubling the sound, which we had to double the power 1, 2, 3 times, 3 plus times. We had to double the power to double the sound. So, Dan, what would that mathematically be?
2 to the third.
2 to the third to get 2 times, right?
8 times. Yep.
Yeah. Well, you get 8 times. You have to 8 times the power to get
double the sound.
To get double the sound. Yeah, that works out. So let's continue on. Continue on there. We get 16, 32, 64, all the way down. Somewhere, most speakers are going to fall somewhere in that 512 watts. They'll be 500 watt cabinets, but if you look at the spec sheet, it's generally like 400 watts for the woofer in the cabinet, and then there's 120 for the high frequency driver. So that's why the 512 is pretty much, it's probably what most of them are doing or what they're capable of doing. So that I wanted to just continue to show the doubling of the power as we go down. Now, the interesting, when we get to the very end of that, especially example 1, 2, and 3, is that if you have a speaker if you had an amplifier that would be able to produce 4,096 watts of power into the drivers, you still are only jumping from, on a very first example, from 131 decibels, which some of our DJ speakers can do. You're only jumping to 134, even though you're putting 4,000 watts of power into that, which seems like a horribly large amount of wattage that is going into that speaker. Looking at the one right below it, that was an even less efficient speaker. That one, I'm putting 4,000 watts of power into it, and I'm getting 132 max decibel reading at 1 meter out. This is why audio, and it comes to wattage, is so difficult. It does matter from the standpoint of what the speaker's it'll eventually be able to do, but it really starts down as how efficient is that speaker? That's the biggest part. Is it a 96 efficiency at 1 watt, 1 meter? Is it, as example 3, 105? 105 is the highest I've ever seen a measurement, and I don't believe any of the speakers that I went through here today got to that point. But there was at one time a powered speaker that was 105, tested at 105 1 watt for 1 watt at 1 meter. And of course, you take that across, and if that is getting 2,000 watts of power, which is not unusual, that's possible. That's 138 decibels. That's getting to the point of being, almost ear bleeding. And at 141, you're right there, because the human ear starts to, get pain at that 130, 135. And by 140, you're definitely in pain from the sound pressure. But it's just
so
amazing.
Announced in 3 days from now, there will be a speaker company that debuts the speaker that's 4,000 watts of power.
Exactly.
Just saying.
3
days. Well, I'm going to give it 3 days.
And they showed some listings from Amazon at the audio symposium, and there was one that was saying it's a 20 or 12,000 watt amplifier, and it could do. They talk about the Ben talked about the siren that can get like 200 decibels. It's like you can't get much above. Yes, you can. That he talks about that volcano that exploded that was supposed to be 160, 180, whatever decibels, whatever it is. You can't get that loud. I mean, eventually that people die. They have got a speaker at Electro Voice that was literally behind me. Not that it was being used, but that's where it was. And it was this big 4 foot by 4 foot wedgie thing, and it's a big cone, and that's designed to be in like a stadium, a huge stadium, to be able to throw across the stadium. And its max SPL that thing had was incredible. And as he said, is that if we would put all the power to that it could take and cranked it up, because it would like liquefy your brain back there as I'm sitting 2 feet in front of it, or 3 feet in front, whatever it was. Because that thing is just that crazy with output on that thing. It's in there basically to say, yep, look at that. it's not like they actually do anything with it, but it is cool to
They
look
hold
at.
you hostage. Just
Yeah.
admit it. They held you hostage, and they
Exactly.
said, if you didn't buy 12 speakers before you leave, we're turning this on.
We're turning this on, and then you're going to have to sit in front of it for like 3 seconds and die. Okay. I'll buy.
I'll do it, man. I'll do it.
So every speaker you see here, except for the mini columns at the bottom or the column arrays at the very bottom, are all 12-inch cones, 12-inch woofers in that. And I went through and I started doing kind of a comparison, which I think that between EV, QSC, and JBL, those were kind of the three that I think those were. I think the K12 fits the EKX line. I don't think the K12 gets to the ETX line. Capability wise in the JBL version. But just to give you an idea, as you go across there, QSC K12, everyone knows it. Most people have used them or own them. Is that you buzz across with those, and those say they've got roughly a 2,000 watt amplifier in those, and that they are clocked out at a 132. 5 years ago, there was a big push within the industry to be showing that what the 1 watt 1 meter sensitivity number was. Today, that's pretty much off the table. No one is talking about that anymore because it sounds more cool to be talking about the big number. So they talk about that they've got a 2,000 watt max amplifier in that particular unit, and the max SPL that it can reach is 132. So now we have to do our math backwards. We start at the 132, and that's what it can do, and then we're going to go backwards, subtracting 3 decibels for each step down. And then we're able to get to what that 1 watt 1 meter number should be. What they're doing to come up with that final number is they're doing the opposite. They're doing the measurement at the 1 watt and 1 meter, then they're adding 3 decibels each time and going the other direction. So it's like this game that's going on, and it's really just it's a marketing ploy. Information's the same. It's just they used to tell us the left number, and now they're telling us the right number, and we have to figure out the left number. It works.
Now, one of the things, John, that you and I were talking about, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead
No,
here,
go ahead.
but when we see this number at the end, right, not only, first off, are we probably not going to run our speakers at 135 dB, but that's not even realistic for us to expect, right? You're saying like that's a moment, that's not a straight, consistent tone.
Exactly. That is. Before we get that, and we're going to roll right into that, but I want to set this. Cubbie, when you're playing at a wedding, where do you think your typical volume level is on your dance floor, decibel wise? What do you just take a shot at that?
I have no idea. I would probably say about 100, 105, not very loud. Because I got some venues that are like, oh, you can't be over this because we got neighbors next door and they can hear it in the bass, So, yeah, probably 105 is probably what I'd say.
You're pretty much right on. Is that most of the time when we're performing, we're going to be somewhere in the columns of the 16 to 32 watts. Not that that's exactly how much we're using, because that is the volume that the music, but when you get a bass hit, the bass takes more wattage from your amplifier. So you're going to have an instant, microsecond where it's going to be a bigger amplifier need for that bass hit. But that's kind of where we're at. So what Dan is talking about is that when the speaker is supposed to be, let's look at that K2, K12 there, or the K2, excuse me. You go over, and it's 132 is what it says, but that is at the max wattage, and that's for that one instant in time that it can hit that before it dies and blows up. Realistically, there's the max wattage, and then there's the running wattage of what that can do. That speaker probably has more realistically a running wattage of somewhere between 750 and 1,000 watts of power capable. So that would bring us down to its comfort range is probably closer to the 512 on our chart here, or the 1024, where you're running the speaker between 126 and 128, somewhere in that ballpark, would probably be more of a realistic expectation of max output. But again, that would only be for that bass hit, because if you exceed, that bass hit's going to drive the need for the amplifier, and that would mean that bass is at that. Most of your programmed music is probably even going to be lower than that. You might have the speaker may test out on your little meter. It might test out at max at a 125. You may never see it on the meter get to 130 because there's the what it's going to run at, the program music, what it's going to run at, and then there's that peak stuff. The peak stuff, okay, it's there, but it's not realistic. None of us are really getting there. And if we're pushing it that hard to get to the peak stuff, we're probably about ready to blow the speaker up. But yeah, Cubbie, you're exactly right. That 100 to 110 is where, if our dance floors are at that loud at a wedding, that we have guests complaining.
Yeah. Like I said, a lot of it's based on the room, height, ceilings, where's the ceiling, cement floors, number of guests that are close, how many guests are there. I just really watch my numbers, or, watch my volume.
And some of those things, factors like the number of guests there. When you have a dance floor of people and there's bodies out there sucking up that volume, that means that our soft bodies and clothing are sucking in that. There's no reflecting of the sound off our bodies. So that means the sound is going out and hitting this person. So now in order to be heard on the other side of the room, we have to have that sound bouncing more. And that means sometimes we have to turn it up so it will have more energy to bounce off the ceiling and get across to the people on the other side. So we get the dance floor, in order to continue to have that 105 on the dance floor, we may have to be pushing up into the middle colored bar there into that 115 range, which for most speakers is kind of fairly comfortable. They can run at 115 to 120. It's when you start pushing above 120 that a lot of our DJ speakers start to struggle, just because that's on this chart it only says it's 128 watts. But you're going to have peaks when you're at 115. There's going to be peaks with that bass, and that's all of a sudden going to take 500 to 600 watts to do that bass line, which is one of the reasons why subwoofers are so nice, is they can take some of that.
Well, and I think this also goes, it's not the direct kind of correlation, but, we often talk about, if you have a larger number of people needing to have more speakers, right? And it's this idea that our bodies are going to soak up that sound, right? If we have a bunch of people, they're going to soak up that sound. And so you're pushing that speaker to try and overcome that soaking up. So you need the extra speakers to kind of help push. Otherwise you're trying to make a speaker do more work, and it's just going to peter out.
It really will, and that's where it separates our name brand, the EV, the JBL, the RCF Yorkville, from some of the knockoff speakers that are out there. You go on Amazon, you can find a ton of them. If you're looking for a 12-inch DJ speaker, there's going to be a lot of different names that pop up, and Powell is one, Rockville is another, and those speakers are going to be the ones that, okay, so I start out the night and I've got a decent sound from it, and I'm playing at that 104 to 107. Everything's looking really good. Well, and all of a sudden I've got a dance floor full of people. I have to now start pushing it up into those higher ranges, and I needed to be playing at about 115 to 120 decibels to be able to be pushing through the room. And if you look, that's at the end of the speaker's existence or power capability. So I'm probably not going to be able to, and especially the example with the Powell, I'm not going to be able to get enough out of that speaker, or two of them if I'm typical DJ setup. I'm not going to get enough sound out of those to be able to produce the frequencies and the sound to cover a room and do it well. If I have one of them and I just need it for cocktail music, that's a different story. But if I need it for a dance situation, that's definitely a different world. So yes, Brian, if you're out there, we'll put a link to this spreadsheet. This is something I put together, and I did this based on the numbers. So they may not be, when it comes to the testing, the 1 watt 1 meter. I'm doing this. This is all done mathematically, and it should be accurate based on the numbers they did give us. But it doesn't mean it's perfect. Like let's look at the turbo sound. The turbo sound IQ12 says I came up with a 96 sensitivity rating at 1 watt per meter. They may have tested it and they came up with a different number. I don't know for sure. But what I do know is that they said their max is at 125 watts is 130 decibels. So I just kind of worked my way backwards, calculating from there. So I could be off a little bit, but the concept is what I really wanted to get across, is that in order to double the sound, you have to go up 10 decibels. And in order to do that, you have to multiply the power times 8, right, Dan? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
And when you do those two things together, you've run out of wattage, the watts really fast. If you don't, especially if you don't start off with enough sensitivity capability. And that can, again, we look at that Powell, we go all the way over to 1,000 watts. It's at 122. We go to the EV ETX 12 at the top. I can go over to the 128 column, and I'm already with 128 watts of power into the ETX 12P. I've already exceeded the 1,000 watts going through that Powell speaker. And the ETX still has multiple jumps to go before it runs out of amplifier power. So the SPL can be a huge, huge factor when it comes to your speakers and their efficiency.
And this should hopefully, give you kind of a better way. And we've done talks about, watts don't matter. And this is kind of what that all stems from, is this the idea that the SPL is where it's going to matter. And to get the SPL, you do have to, you have to look at the watts, but it's not that all 1,000-watt speakers are the same.
Correct.
It's that, it comes down to their efficiency. And this hopefully kind of gives you that better way to understand it, is the efficiency is really what we know is based upon the 1 watt, 1 meter.
Very much so.
That's where you're going to see it. You can quickly see, and again, those better brands, or even, and like, even if we just compare the EV line, right? You got the EKX, the ETX, the ELX, the ZLX, just from looking at that can give you an indication of which is their top of the line versus which is their more entry line.
Yeah, I was surprised at that.
Like you can look at it just from that standpoint, and that makes sense, right? Their lower end is going to be something that's not going to be as efficient. So doesn't mean it's a bad speaker.
No, I was expecting there to be, I don't want to say more consistency maybe, but I didn't expect to have that variation, because really, if you look at it from the ZLX to the ETX, you're not quite doubling the sound pressure, but you're a quarter more sound pressure to some extent, or whatever, half as much. Yeah. So when you're definitely having a noticeable gain as you're stepping up. Could you tell the difference with 1 watt, 1 meter between the ZLX and ELX? You're going up 2 decibels, maybe, but 5 decibels. You definitely notice that. No question about it. That there is a jump there.
And again, this is how hard you would have to run things, to get that sound to be what you want.
So, Cubbie, you've got the Evolve 50s.
Yes.
And you've heard people talk about at the very bottom. We've got the Evox and a few others. When you hear people talk about that, you've heard, I'm sure, people say, "Oh, the Evox can blow that one out of the water, or the Maui can blow it out of the water." I'm guessing you've heard those people talk about. Yeah.
Well, a lot of ones I hear about, and I wish it was on there, was the RCFs, the line arrays, the ones that they have. Heard a lot of good things about the RCFs.
Which ones were the RCF? Did I not?
All I see is put the line arrays on.
Which ones were the RCFs line array? Which ones are those?
I don't know, but they do have a set of line arrays. I don't know the numbers.
The Evox is RCF, isn't it?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah. It is. It's not Evox isn't the brand. That's right. Yeah, Evox is the
name.
Model.
Okay, yeah.
That's the model.
I don't know enough about RCFs.
Okay.
I literally
it's been one of those days, everybody.
I was thinking, it's like, gosh, I thought I did that. But yeah, the Evox J8. And the reason I went with the J8 because there's the Evox 12, and you would think the Evox 12 would be maybe 12 a 12-inch subwoofer. No, that's not the case. Evox 12 is a 15-inch subwoofer. The J8 has a 12-inch sub. That's why it's in here, and the Evox 12 is not. 15-inch compared to a 12-inch, you've got a difference of capability, for one thing. Yeah. And they're also larger speakers are more sensitive and usually more efficient, which is a video for another day. So these are all comparing, except for the Bose. The Bose, there is no 12-inch subwoofer in the Bose world. It's got their weird sub 2 or whatever it is. I don't know. It's just stupid, but that's just what it is. But I wanted to give you guys a comparison. And the interesting thing in this one is the number of, I've heard the RCF Evox, J8, it all does the Evolve 50 all day long. Well, according to the numbers, yes, at the very, very end of it, that the Evolve is supposed to be, it's about 1,000-watt amp, and its max SPL is 127, and the Evox is a 128 at 1,400 watts. So as you pull it back to, in essence, 1,000 watts, and as equivalent, it's going to be a little bit less because it's, as you started on the left side, it's a little less efficient as the Evolve 50. The big thing is that, people are saying that, oh, it just, we'll mop the floor with mop the floor with the Evers. Again, if you can tell the difference in 1 decibel between one sound and the other, good for you. I can't.
Yeah.
It's not so much that. It's typically, I've owned the Evox. I own the Evolve. I could set them and make them so they were almost equivalent. It's really the person running it. If they know how to use it, and they know how to set it up, and they know how to push it, you can make either one look much better than the other one if you know what you're doing.
I think you also hit on the one thing. I've heard it more in the argument of the J12s, but I think a lot of people take the 12 number and think that means the sub, and so they're automatically trying to compare apples to oranges as opposed to apples to apples.
Yeah. Yeah, and that becomes the problem is that, Maui, this is their 12-inch version with the 12-inch sub. The LD Systems, they've got multiple Maui versions that are much bigger. I think, do they have an 18 in there too somewhere? Possibly. Certainly they have 15s. 15 is the main one that they go to. And they've got some great stats on some of their units in their column array systems. But it's not, for this comparison, I wanted to stick with 12s. And as you kind of see, as you look across the board, they're all kind of in the same ballpark. It really would get down to the operator and who's running it, and knowing that, okay, if I need to be pushing a little bit more, I need to be tweaking a little bit here, or if I'm, running microphones, I need to do this. When you know your gear and you know how to run your gear, you can make it do amazing things. When you don't know how to work with your gear properly, you get frustrated. Pretty much.
Yep.
So, yeah, we can put that link. We'll put that in the below the video. I'll when I get back into my main computer, I'll put that link into the description of the video so you guys can see it. It'll be on the YouTube. The YouTube video is where you guys will be able to see it. So that makes sense, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put things in a lot better perspective than what I was used to with it.
Yeah, it's again, the part that just always surprises me is how much, if you want to double that sound, is making it twice as loud. You shouldn't think it would take that much, but it takes a horrible amount of horsepower, especially as you're jumping from 500 watts to 1,000 watts, and you're only getting a little bit. If I'm at 500 watts, and if I really want to double my sound and get to 135, I literally have to go from 500 watts to 4,000 watts to double my sound pressure. It's like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. So, since I can't do that all the time, then we're going to circle all the way back to the beginning of our show tonight. How do I get more sound? I add more speakers and place them properly. And then I can get some of that coupling to go on with my subwoofers, or I have my highs and I can set my highs in there and get them set properly so that they will work as a unit, producing those sound waves across the room. Yeah.
Interesting.
So up next, gang, we just put the link in there for the Howie. You guys can go check that out. Howie is going to be on next at 10 o'clock Eastern, so in about 5 minutes, at DJNTV.com/chill. They do a little recording, and then after that, they will be going and opening up the room so everyone can chat and hang out and talk more speakers, and you guys can talk the numbers and such and say, hey, does that seem right? And they'll be like, yeah, it does, unfortunately. We want to make it so that I have a 500 watt speaker that can, take the paint off the wall, and it doesn't work all the time. It doesn't. Let's see, Dan, you got your video for Wednesday?
I do.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about this week?
So it's not so much gear. It's more self-care.
Oh, nice.
Self-care.
Excellent.
It's a shorter one, but it's one of those that I'm really feeling this week. And those of you that are full-time, or not full-time, but like full-time outside of DJing job as well as DJing, check it out Wednesday and heed my warning. We'll go with that.
Excellent. And I've got tomorrow. The next 5 are basically some things from my Tuesday ones are talking about audio and giving some of the things that we talked about here tonight, but showing some examples of a few of the things in that 60-second little tidbit, so you guys can check that out. Okay, we're going to take 60 seconds. Each one of us gets about 20 seconds, and I want to end shows with this. One of your a win for the week, or a moment that you had this past week that was like just a great, that was like, yeah, that was neat this past week. Nothing DJ related, or it could be.
Oh,
could be anything.
nothing DJ.
I was like, that's where we're going, right? DJ.
If it's DJ related, great. But I mean, our lives, we've got a lot of things that have gone on, and I want to just basically we're going to basically what's your win for the week, and we're going to just go boom, 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 and we're going to wrap up, and we'll go that. Dan, you start, Cubbie, and then I'll finish, and then Dan, you finish. Okay, Dan.
Okay,
go.
Okay, so my wife challenged me on like Saturday, of course, to make Mother's Day be one of those days where she felt special. And of course, she told me the day before. So I did everything I could in my power. At the end of the day, I kind of looked at her and I said, did you have a good Mother's Day? Because I did some things, but not that much because of days notice. And she goes, I felt really special. Thank you.
Excellent.
So that was my win.
Cubbie.
That's awesome. Mine's DJ related. I officiated and wedding this weekend, and my ceremony just hit. I got some great stuff from the groom. I got some great stuff from the bride, and it was just it was really, 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 really good. I had a really good wedding this last Saturday, and looking forward to my bonus daughter graduating this Saturday.
Woohoo! Nice. That'll be next week's win.
Actually, Sunday. Yeah, it's the graduation Sunday's parties on Saturday, then two weddings Friday, Saturday.
So mine for the week is we're getting to the end of the track season, and we're getting into the tournament in essence. And my daughter, who runs, she went to state last year in one event, and she's been coming along in that event, and she's been working hard in a couple of other events. And this past weekend, when she was doing some work out here, because I'm the weird dad that has a track set up in the backyard. And she looked really, really strong. And we've got the conference meet coming up this week, so we're hoping that her hard work will pay off. So we're fingers crossed this will be a good week for her in her track. So it's looking good, though.
Awesome.
Very cool. Well, on that note, hopefully you found your win this past week. Hopefully you've got something that is there. And I tell you one thing I would love drop it in the comments. Like if this video is over and it's up there, drop it in the comments. Share your wins with us as well. We want to hear what things went great for you this past week. But thank you very much for taking time. Hopefully you learned some things about speakers and maybe kind of starting to see through some of that fog and marketing mystery stuff that they try and throw at you, and see right to the heart of what we're talking about. We will see you all next week. Have yourself a wonderful night. Bye-bye, everybody.
Night, everybody.